The alarm bells rang across the Coalition frigate Harmony's edge as it approached the damaged vessel. Captain Vex stood on the bridge, his scaled green hands gripping the command rail. The ship floating before them was unlike anything in the Coalition database. "Report," Vex ordered, his voice carrying the authority that came with 20 years of military service. "Unknown vessel, Captain," reported his tactical officer, a blue-skinned Aquarian named Finn. "Hull composition suggests primitive metallurgy. Energy signatures are weak. Multiple breach points detected." Vex studied the vessel through the main viewer. It was roughly the size of a Coalition transport, but its design was crude and angular. Burn marks scarred its hull, and atmosphere leaked from several holes. Whatever had attacked this ship had done serious damage. "Any signs of life?" Vex asked. "Weak biosignatures detected. Maybe 20 individuals still alive," Finn replied, checking his sensors. "Captain, there are markings on the hull. Symbols we have not seen before." The symbols were painted in red and white. A cross inside a circle, and strange letters spelling out words in an unknown language. Vex made a decision that would change everything he thought he knew about the galaxy. "Prepare boarding party," he commanded. This could be a new species, standard first contact protocols. Within minutes, Vex led 12 Coalition soldiers through the airlocks connecting the two ships. They wore full armor and carried energy weapons, ready for anything. The damaged ship's corridors were dark, lit only by emergency lighting that cast eerie red shadows on the walls. The air smelled of smoke, blood, and something else Vex could not identify. Human sweat, though he did not know that yet. Bodies lay scattered in the hallways, wearing uniforms of different colors and designs. Some wore elaborate jackets with shiny metal pieces pinned to their chests. Others wore simple clothes with no decorations at all. "This way, Captain," whispered his squad leader, pointing toward sounds coming from deeper in the ship. They moved carefully through the corridors until they reached what appeared to be the ship's medical bay. Vex stopped at the entrance, confused by what he saw inside. The room was chaos. Wounded beings lay on tables and floors, some covered in blood. But what caught Vex's attention was not the wounded. It was the way the survivors were organized. In the center of the room, a human in plain green clothes worked on a badly injured soldier. This human had no shiny medals on his uniform, no special markings, nothing to show high rank. He looked ordinary, maybe 40 years old, with short brown hair and calm eyes. His hands moved with steady purpose as he worked to stop bleeding from a deep wound. "More pressure here," the plain human said quietly to another human helping him. "Hold this while I check the pulse." What puzzled Vex was how the other humans acted around this plain one. A human wearing an elaborate uniform with many medals stood nearby, obviously waiting. When the plain human looked up and nodded, the decorated human immediately stepped forward. "Doc, the Coalition soldiers are here," the decorated human said, with deep respect in his voice. "I can see that, Commander Blake," the plain human replied without looking up from his patient. "Ask them to wait a moment. This one needs immediate attention." Vex felt his jaw drop. The decorated human, who was clearly an officer of high rank, had just been given an order by someone who looked like a common soldier. And he had accepted it without question. "You," Vex called out, pointing to Commander Blake. "Are you the leader of this vessel?" Blake looked toward the plain human before answering. "Doc, they want to know who is in charge." The plain human finished bandaging his patient and finally looked up at the Coalition soldiers. His expression was calm, showing no fear despite facing armed aliens who had just boarded his ship. "I suppose that depends on what you mean by in charge," the plain human said, wiping blood from his hands on a cloth. "I am Tom Miller. My friends call me Doc." Vex studied this Tom Miller carefully. No rank insignia, no medals, no symbols of authority. Yet every human in the room watched him with obvious respect. When Doc moved to the next patient, other humans. Immediately cleared a path for him. "You are a medical person?" Vex asked, trying to understand. "Field medic," Doc replied simply, already focused on examining another wounded human. "Been doing this for about 15 years now." "But they follow your orders," Vex pointed out, gesturing toward the other humans. Doc looked up with a slight smile. "Do they?" I had not noticed. "I just tell them what needs doing, and they usually help out." This was impossible. In coalition society, authority came from rank, which came from birth, caste, and military position. The highest ranking officer commanded, and lower ranks obeyed. There was no confusion, no questions about who led, yet here was clear evidence that these humans operated differently. Vex watched as Doc quietly asked a human with sergeant stripes to check on patients in the next room. The sergeant immediately followed the request, though he outranked Doc according to the markings on their uniforms. "Captain," whispered Finn in Vex's ear, "several of our soldiers were injured when we forced the airlock." The cutting beam backfired. Vex turned to see 3 of his own soldiers leaning against the wall, holding burned hands and arms. The coalition. Medical officers were back on their ship, and these burns needed immediate attention. Without being asked, Doc noticed the injured coalition soldiers. He looked at their burns with the same calm expression he showed his own people. "Those look painful," Doc said, approaching the injured aliens. "Mind if I take a look?" The coalition soldiers looked at Vex, uncertain. They had just invaded this ship, and now their enemy wanted to help them. "It is a trick," Finn whispered, but Doc was already examining the burns without waiting for permission. His touch was gentle as he looked at the alien skin, noting how their physiology differed from humans. "Interesting," Doc murmured. "Your skin conducts heat differently than ours. These burns went deeper than they would on a human." He looked up at Vex. "Do you have medical supplies on your ship?" "Why would you help us?" Vex demanded. Doc tilted his head slightly, as if the question confused him. "Because you are hurt. That is what medics do." He began treating the coalition soldiers with supplies from the human medical bay. His movements were efficient and sure, and within minutes he had the alien burns cleaned and bandaged. The coalition soldiers looked at their treated wounds with surprise. The pain was already fading. "Your primitive medicine works better than our healing technology," one of the soldiers admitted. "Sometimes simple is better," Doc replied. "The burn is healed when the pain stops and the skin grows back. Does not matter if you use advanced alien technology or human bandages." Vex watched all of this with growing confusion. This human medic had just provided aid to enemy soldiers without asking for anything in return. He showed no fear, no anger, no desire for revenge. He simply did what he thought was right. More puzzling was how the other humans reacted. They did not question Doc's decision to help their captors. They accepted it as natural, as if helping others was just what their leader did. As the coalition soldiers prepared to transport their prisoners, Vex found himself looking at Doc Miller with new eyes. This plain human in simple clothes somehow commanded more real authority than many coalition officers with their elaborate ranks and titles. What kind of species had they encountered? And what did it mean for the galaxy? The detention bay aboard the coalition frigate Harmony's Edge was designed to hold prisoners of war. Rows of energy cells lined the walls, each one capable of holding up to 6 individuals. Captain Vex watched through the security monitors as the surviving humans were processed and assigned to their cells. Standard procedure required identifying the enemy command structure. In every coalition species, this was simple. The highest-ranking officer wore the most elaborate uniform and commanded absolute obedience from subordinates. Interrogation always started with the leader, then worked down through the ranks. These humans made no sense. "Sir, we have identified their commanding officer," reported Lieutenant Kane, a tall humanoid with purple skin and 4 arms. "Commander Blake appears to be their highest-ranking military personnel." He wears the most decorations, and other humans show him military respect. Vex nodded, studying the monitor showing Commander Blake's cell. The human sat straight-backed on his bench, every inch the professional military officer. His uniform was crisp despite the recent battle, and several shiny medals decorated his chest. "Prepare him for interrogation," Vex ordered. But as Kane left to retrieve the prisoner, Vex's attention drifted to another monitor. In a nearby cell, the human called Doc sat quietly reading something. Other prisoners kept glancing toward his cell, and several humans had actually requested to be placed near the medic. "Curious," muttered Finn from his position at the sensor station. "The medical human is receiving more attention from his companions than their official commander." Vex waved dismissively. "Medical personnel often receive respect. He probably saved many of their lives." Commander Blake was brought to the interrogation room within the hour. Vex entered to find a confident human, who met his gaze directly without showing fear or submission. Good. Confident leaders were easier to break than frightened ones. "I am Captain Vex of the Coalition Defense Force," he began formally. "You are Commander Blake, leader of the human military unit we captured." "I am Commander John Blake, yes," the human replied. His voice was steady and professional. "But I think there has been a misunderstanding about leadership. Explain." Blake shifted in his chair, looking uncomfortable for the first time. "Well, Captain, I hold the highest military rank among our group. But when it comes to important decisions, especially those affecting our people's welfare, we usually consult with Doc." Vex felt his confusion returning. The medical officer? Why would a medic make command decisions? "Because he is good at it," Blake said simply. "Doc has been with us through 7 different conflicts. He knows each person in our unit personally. When someone needs to make a hard choice that affects lives, we trust his judgment. But you outrank him." "Yes, I do. And if we were in a formal military operation, I would give the orders and he would follow them. But this is not a formal military operation anymore, is it? We are prisoners. Our survival depends on different skills now." Vex studied the human commander carefully. Blake seemed sincere, but this made no logical sense. Authority came from rank, which came from the military hierarchy. A medic could not simply take command because others trusted him. "I want to speak with this Doc," Vex decided. "Of course. But Captain, you should understand something first. Doc will not try to impress you or intimidate you. He will just talk to you like a normal person." Some military officers find that unsettling. 20 minutes later, Tom Miller sat in the same chair that Blake had occupied. He looked even more ordinary in the harsh light of the interrogation room. His simple green uniform had no decorations, no rank insignia, nothing to indicate authority. Yet something about his presence made Vex feel off balance. "So you are the human leader," Vex began. "I am a field medic," Doc replied calmly. "Blake is the commanding officer. But the others look to you for guidance." Doc considered this for a moment. "I suppose they do sometimes. People tend to ask my opinion when they are worried or scared. I have been around longer than most of them." "And you make decisions for your unit?" "Not exactly. I give advice when asked. Sometimes I suggest what might work best for everyone. But I do not give orders or command anyone." Vex felt increasingly frustrated. Every coalition interrogation manual said that prisoners would either claim authority or deny it completely. This human was doing neither. He admitted to influence while denying command. "What is your military rank?" Vex demanded. "Sergeant." "Well, technically Sergeant First Class, but most people just call me Doc." "A sergeant outranking a commander is impossible." Doc tilted his head slightly. "I do not outrank Blake. He makes the military decisions. I just help where I can." "Then why do the other prisoners defer to your judgment?" For the first time, Doc smiled slightly. "Have you ever been in combat, Captain?" "Of course." I have led many successful operations. Then you know that when people are scared and hurt, they look for someone who has helped them before, someone they trust to put their safety first. Rank does not matter much when you are bleeding. Vex stared at the human medic. This was unlike anything in his experience. In coalition society, authority was clear and absolute. Lower castes obeyed higher castes without question. Military ranks followed the same pattern. I want to test something. Vex decided. He activated the communication system. Bring all human prisoners to Observation Room 3. 20 minutes later, 18 humans stood in the large observation room under heavy guard. Commander Blake stood at attention near the front, clearly ready to speak for his people. But Vex noticed how many of the humans positioned themselves where they could see Doc, who stood quietly near the side wall. I am Admiral Kor, announced a massive reptilian who entered the room. His scales were deep red with gold markings that indicated the highest coalition rank. I will negotiate prisoner exchange with your leadership. Admiral Kor looked directly at Commander Blake. You are their commander? Blake glanced toward Doc before answering. I am the ranking military officer, Admiral. But for negotiations affecting our people's welfare, you should probably speak with Doc. The Admiral's head swiveled toward the plainly dressed medic. You are their negotiator? I am whatever they need me to be, Doc replied simply. Admiral Kor looked between Blake and Doc with obvious confusion. Who speaks for your people? Doc stepped forward slightly. What would you like to discuss, Admiral? Prisoner treatment protocols, medical care for the wounded, exchange possibilities. Those sound like important topics. I would be happy to talk about them. Vex watched in amazement as the most powerful military officer in this sector began negotiating with a human sergeant. Admiral Kor started by demanding information about human military capabilities. Doc politely declined to provide tactical data, but offered to discuss medical treatment for coalition soldiers who might be wounded in future encounters. Somehow, Doc turned every demand into a reasonable discussion. When Kor threatened reduced food rations, Doc suggested that healthy prisoners would be less trouble to guard. When the Admiral demanded human technical information, Doc offered to teach coalition medics some human first aid techniques. Within an hour, Admiral Kor had agreed to improve prisoner conditions, provide better medical supplies, and allow humans to tend their own wounded. In return, Doc had promised to share some basic medical knowledge and ensure prisoner cooperation. As the humans were led back to their cells, Vex heard one young soldier whisper to another, Doc got us better food and medical supplies. How does he do that? He just talks to them like people instead of enemies, came the reply. Vex stood in the empty observation room, his understanding of command authority completely shaken. These humans followed a medic not because he ordered them to, but because he consistently acted in their best interests. He wielded influence not through rank or intimidation, but through trust earned over years of selfless service. For the first time in his military career, Captain Vex wondered if the coalition's rigid hierarchy might not be the only way to organize a military force. And that thought terrified him more than any enemy weapon ever had. The attack came without warning. Captain Vex was reviewing prisoner reports in his quarters when the ship's alarm system screamed to life. Red lights flashed throughout the corridors as the automated voice announced, "Battle stations. All personnel to combat positions. This is not a drill." Vex rushed to the bridge where chaos greeted him. 3 unknown vessels had appeared on the sensors, moving fast and firing energy weapons at the Harmony's edge. "Pirates, Captain," reported Finn, his blue hands flying over the tactical controls. "Looks like a Raven-class raider and 2 smaller. Attack craft. They must think we are an easy target with all the damage from the human shipboarding." The coalition frigate shook as enemy fire struck the shields. Vex gripped his command chair and studied the tactical display. The pirates were using a standard Wolf-Pack attack pattern, trying to overwhelm the ship's defenses through coordinated strikes. "Return fire," Vex ordered. "Target their lead ship." The battle lasted 20 minutes. Coalition weapons were superior to pirate technology, but the raiders were fast and clever. They hit the frigate with concentrated fire, targeting specific systems instead of trying to destroy the ship completely. "Medical bay hit," reported Kane from the damage control station. "Direct strike to Section 7. Vex felt his stomach drop. Section 7 housed the main medical facility and most of the Coalition's healing equipment. Worse, it was where Dr. Plex and his entire medical staff had been working. Casualties? Vex demanded. Multiple wounded throughout the ship. But Captain ... Kane paused, checking his readings again. The medical bay suffered complete destruction. Dr. Plex and all medical personnel are dead. The Coalition frigate drove off the pirates, but the damage was severe. 23 crew members were wounded, several critically, and they had no medical staff left to treat them. "Sir," Finn called out urgently. "Admiral Kor was injured when the bridge took a hit. He is unconscious and bleeding badly." Vex rushed to where the massive reptilian lay crumpled near the communications console. Admiral Kor's red scales were turning pale, and dark blood pooled beneath his body. Without immediate medical attention, the highest-ranking Coalition officer in this sector would die. "Get him to the medical bay," Vex ordered. "Captain, the medical bay is destroyed. All our healing equipment is gone." Vex stared at his dying superior officer, feeling helpless. Coalition technology could heal almost any wound, but only if they had working medical equipment and trained personnel. Without both, even minor injuries could become fatal. "Sir," Kane said quietly, "the human medic is still alive." Vex turned to stare at his lieutenant. "What are you suggesting?" "The human called Doc. He treated our soldiers yesterday with primitive equipment. Maybe he could help the Admiral." It was a desperate idea. Trust their most important officer to an enemy prisoner using inferior human medicine. But as Vex watched Admiral Kor's breathing become more shallow, he realized they had no choice. "Bring the human medic here immediately," he ordered. Doc arrived under heavy guard 5 minutes later. He took one look at Admiral Kor and knelt beside the wounded reptilian without hesitation. "How long has he been unconscious?" Doc asked, his hands already examining the injuries. 6 minutes, Vex replied. "Can you help him?" Doc did not answer. Immediately, his fingers traced along Kor's scaled skin, checking pulse points and examining wounds with careful precision. The Admiral had taken shrapnel to his torso and head, and internal bleeding was obvious. "I need medical supplies," Doc said finally. "Your medical bay is destroyed, so I will have to improvise. Do you have any emergency medical kits?" "Basic supplies only. Nothing advanced enough for these injuries." "Bring me whatever you have. Also, I need a clean space to work. This bridge is too exposed if the pirates come back." Within minutes, Doc had been moved to a secure conference room along with Admiral Kor and every medical supply the ship could provide. Vex watched through the observation window as the human medic spread the limited supplies on a table and began organizing them. "This is insane," muttered Finn. "Human medicine is primitive. He cannot possibly save the Admiral." But Doc was already at work. With steady hands, he began cleaning Admiral Kor's wounds and assessing the damage. He worked differently than Coalition medical officers. Where alien doctors relied on advanced scanners and healing technology, Doc used his hands, eyes, and experience. "I need help," Doc called out to the guards. "Two of you come here." The Coalition soldiers looked uncertain until Vex nodded permission. Doc quickly assigned them tasks, one to monitor the Admiral's breathing, another to hold pressure on a bleeding wound. "Like this," Doc showed them, positioning their hands correctly. "Keep steady pressure." Do not let up even if your arms get tired. The ship shook again as the pirates made another attack run. Energy blasts echoed through the hull, but Doc's hands never wavered as he worked on the Admiral's injuries. "Captain," came Kane's voice over the communication system. "The pirates are regrouping for another attack. They have called in reinforcements." Vex split his attention between the battle outside and the medical drama in the conference room. Doc had opened Admiral Kor's chest cavity and was working directly on internal organs with tools that looked primitive compared to Coalition technology. "Human medic," Vex called through the intercom. "We may have to move the Admiral if the pirates break through our defenses. Then you will be moving a dead reptilian," Doc replied without looking up from his work. "He cannot be moved for at least 30 minutes. His internal bleeding has to be stopped first. We may not have 30 minutes. Doc finally looked up, meeting Vex's eyes through the observation window. "Then you better make sure we do." There was something in the human's voice that made Vex pause. Not a threat or demand, but a simple statement of necessity. Doc was not asking for protection. He was telling Vex what needed to happen for Admiral Kor to survive. "All available crew to battle stations," Vex announced ship-wide. "Defensive positions. We hold this position for the next 30 minutes no matter what." The second pirate attack was fiercer than the first. 6 ships this time, including 2 heavy cruisers. They hammered the Coalition frigate with everything. They had trying to force surrender or evacuation, but something had changed in the Coalition crew. They fought with desperate determination, knowing that their admiral's life depended on holding their position. Junior officers took impossible risks to protect the ship. Engineers worked under enemy fire to keep shields operational. Through it all, Doc continued operating on Admiral Kor with calm precision. The ship rocked and shuddered around him, but his hands remained steady. He called out quiet instructions to his alien assistants, who found themselves following orders from an enemy prisoner without question. "Bleeding is under control," Doc announced after 25 minutes. "Pulse is stabilizing. He should survive if we can get him proper rest." Admiral Kor's eyes opened slowly, focusing on the human face above him. "What happened?" "You were injured in battle," Doc explained gently. "You need to stay still while your body heals." The massive reptilian tried to sit up, then thought better of it as pain shot through his torso. "You saved me." "That is what medics do," Doc replied simply. Outside, the pirate attack was finally broken. The raiders retreated, their ships too damaged to continue fighting. The Coalition frigate had survived, battered but intact. As Admiral Kor was carefully moved to a makeshift medical facility, Vex found himself staring at the human medic with new understanding. Doc had worked to save an enemy officer's life while under attack, using inferior equipment and improvised techniques. He had turned Coalition soldiers into effective medical assistants with nothing but calm authority and clear instructions. Most importantly, he had done all of this while remaining a prisoner, helping people who had captured him and his friends. Vex began to realize that these humans operated by rules very different from anything the Coalition understood. Admiral Kor woke slowly in the makeshift medical facility. His body ached, but the sharp pain in his chest had dulled to a manageable throb. Bandages covered most of his torso, and strange-smelling human medicine made his nostrils burn slightly. First thing he saw was Doc sitting nearby, reading from a small electronic device. The human medic looked tired but alert, occasionally glancing up to check on his patient's condition. "How long was I unconscious?" Kor asked, his voice rough. "About 6 hours," Doc replied, setting down his device. "How do you feel?" Kor carefully tested his limbs and breathing. Everything worked, though movement brought discomfort. "Better than I should, considering the circumstances. Your primitive medicine is more effective than expected. Sometimes simple works better than complicated," Doc said with a slight smile. Your species heals faster than humans do. The main challenge was stopping the internal bleeding before your body could begin repairs. The Admiral studied the human medic carefully. Doc showed no pride in his achievement, no attempt to claim credit for saving a high-ranking coalition officer. He simply stated facts as if anyone could have done the same thing. "Why did you help me?" Core asked directly. Doc tilted his head, looking genuinely puzzled by the question. "You were hurt, and I could help. What other reason would I need? I am your enemy. My people captured your ship and imprisoned your friends. That does not change the fact that you were bleeding to death," Doc replied calmly. "I took an oath. When I became a medic, I help anyone who needs medical attention, regardless of which side they fight for." Core found this concept difficult to understand. In coalition society, loyalty was absolute. You helped your own species and caste, fought enemies without mercy, and showed no weakness to outsiders. The idea of helping an enemy simply because they needed help seemed almost insane. "Your oath is to all beings, not just humans?" "To anyone who suffers," Doc confirmed. "Pain does not care about politics or species. Neither should medicine." A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry to the medical facility. Doc pressed a control, and the door opened to admit a young human soldier. Private Lewis, according to the name tag on his simple uniform. "Doc, sorry to bother you," Lewis said respectfully. "Commander Blake wanted to know if you needed anything. Food, supplies, whatever." "I am fine, Lewis. Thank you for asking. How is the alien Admiral doing?" "He will recover fully with proper rest," Doc replied. Lewis nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "Doc, the Coalition soldiers are asking questions about you. They want to know why we follow your advice instead of Commander Blake's orders." Doc looked thoughtful for a moment. "What did you tell them?" "I tried to explain, but I do not think they understood. They kept asking about rank and authority." Admiral Core watched this exchange with growing fascination. The young soldiers spoke to Doc with obvious respect and affection, but it was different. From military discipline, less formal, more personal. "Lewis," Doc said gently, "remember that they come from a different culture. Their military works differently than ours. Be patient with their questions." "Yes, sir. Yes, Doc." Lewis smiled slightly at his own mistake and left the medical facility. "Interesting," Admiral Core observed after the door closed. "He almost called you sir. Does he consider you his superior officer?" Doc shook his head. "Lewis has been with our unit for 2 years. I have treated his injuries, helped him through difficult times, given him advice when he needed it. He respects me, but not because of rank." "Then why do humans follow you instead of their actual commander?" Doc was quiet for several minutes, clearly thinking about how to explain something that seemed obvious to him, but confusing to others. "Admiral, may I ask you something about coalition military structure?" Core nodded, curious where this was leading. "If a coalition officer gave an order that would get his soldiers killed unnecessarily, what would happen?" "The soldiers would obey the order. Discipline requires absolute obedience to superior rank, even if the order was clearly wrong, especially then. Questioning authority leads to chaos and military breakdown." Doc nodded slowly. "I think I understand the confusion now. Humans see authority differently than the coalition does." "Explain." "In human military culture, we have formal authority and moral authority. Formal authority comes from rank, like Commander Blake's position. But moral authority comes from trust, experience, and consistently making good decisions that protect the people under your care." Admiral Core struggled to process this concept. "So humans have 2 different command structures?" "Not exactly. Blake has formal command authority. When we were in combat operations, his orders were followed without question. But now we are prisoners, and survival depends on different skills. The humans trust my judgment because I have proven over time that I put their welfare first. But how do you maintain military discipline with such flexible authority? Doc smiled. By earning it every day. If I started making bad decisions or stopped caring about the welfare of others, they would stop listening to me. Authority based on trust has to be maintained through action, not just given because of position. A communication panel chimed, and Captain Vex's voice filled the room. Admiral, are you able to receive visitors? Send them in, Kor replied. Vex entered with Finn and Kane, all looking relieved to see their admiral conscious and alert. They also looked uncomfortable being in the same room as Doc, uncertain how to treat someone who was both prisoner and lifesaver. Report, Kor ordered. Ship repairs are proceeding well, Vex began. The pirates caused significant damage, but nothing we cannot fix. However, we lost our entire medical staff. Dr. Plex and all his assistants were killed when the medical bay was destroyed. What about medical care for the crew? That is complicated, Admiral. The human medic has been treating our wounded, but he is still technically a prisoner. Kor looked at Doc, who continued reading his device as if the conversation did not concern him. What is your assessment of his medical abilities? Remarkable, Vex admitted reluctantly. He has saved 3 crew members who would have died without treatment. His techniques are different from ours, but undeniably effective, and his behavior as a prisoner, completely cooperative. He has made no demands, attempted no escapes, caused no trouble. He simply helps anyone who needs medical attention. Admiral Kor made a decision that surprised everyone in the room, including himself. Captain Vex, I want you to offer the human medic temporary medical officer status aboard this ship, with full privileges and access to medical supplies. Vex stared at his superior in shock. Sir, he is an enemy prisoner. He is a medic who saved my life and the lives of our crew, Kor corrected. His actions have demonstrated that he follows medical ethics above political loyalty. Doc finally looked up from his reading. That is generous, Admiral, but I cannot accept an official position while my people remain prisoners. Then what would? You accept? Doc considered the question seriously. Permission to continue treating wounded from both crews. Access to medical supplies as needed. And assurance that helping coalition personnel will not be used against my people in any future. Negotiations, agreed. As the coalition officers left, Admiral Kor remained behind with Doc. The human medic had returned to his reading, but Kor sensed he was available for conversation. Doc, I have been thinking about what you said regarding authority. Yes? In coalition society, we believe that clear hierarchy prevents chaos, but watching you work, I see something different. Your humans follow you because they want to, not because they have to. Doc nodded. Trust is more powerful than fear, but it is also harder to maintain. A leader who rules through fear only needs to be strong. A leader who rules through trust must be worthy of that trust every single day. Admiral Kor lay back, his mind working through implications that challenged everything he thought he knew about command and authority. For the first time in his military career, he wondered if there might be better ways to lead than the Coalition had ever considered. 3 days later, the Coalition rescue fleet arrived at the coordinates where the Harmony's Edge waited for assistance. Admiral Kor stood on the bridge, fully recovered from his injuries, watching as 12 Coalition warships took defensive positions around his damaged frigate. The fleet commander, Admiral Rex of the Saurian High Command, appeared on the main communication screen. His scaled face showed the typical arrogance of Coalition nobility as he surveyed the damaged bridge. Admiral Kor, we received your distress signal. Report your status. Fleet Commander Rex, we are operational but damaged. We have also made contact with a new species that requires immediate attention from High Command. New species? Rex's eyes gleamed with interest. Are they suitable for incorporation into the Coalition? Kor paused, glancing toward the detention. area where the humans waited. That is complicated. I recommend immediate negotiations rather than standard conquest protocols. Nonsense. If they are primitive enough to be captured, they are primitive enough to be conquered. Prepare them for transport to the fleet flagship. Within 2 hours, the human prisoners were being transferred to Admiral Rex's massive dreadnought. Kor accompanied them, officially to provide intelligence briefing, but really to observe how the humans handled a new set of coalition officers. The negotiation room aboard the flagship was designed to intimidate. High ceilings, elaborate decorations showing coalition victories, and a raised platform where Admiral Rex sat like a judge pronouncing sentence on lesser beings. 18 humans stood in formation in the center of the room, guarded by 30 coalition soldiers. Commander Blake stood at attention in front of his people, wearing his dress uniform with all medals and insignia properly displayed. Admiral Rex studied the humans with obvious disappointment. These are the new species? They look weak and poorly organized. Appearances can be deceiving, Kor warned quietly. Silence. I will handle this. Rex stood and addressed the humans directly. I am Fleet Commander Rex of the Coalition High Command. You are prisoners of war, captured while trespassing in Coalition space. Your fate depends on your cooperation. Commander Blake stepped forward. I am Commander John Blake, ranking officer of this unit. We are prepared to discuss prisoner exchange or negotiations between our peoples. Rex laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the large room. You misunderstand your situation. The Coalition does not negotiate with primitive species. You will provide information about your technology and military capabilities, then be processed for integration into Coalition society. I am afraid that will not be possible, Blake replied calmly. It was not a request. It was an order. Blake glanced back toward his people, and Kor noticed how many of the humans were looking at Doc. The medic stood quietly near the back of the group, still wearing his simple uniform with no rank insignia visible. Admiral Rex, Blake said carefully, before we discuss terms, perhaps you should speak with our advisor. Rex followed Blake's gaze to Doc, then looked back with confusion. Your advisor? That one has no rank markings. He appears to be a common soldier. He is our medic. But in matters affecting our people's welfare, we value his counsel. A medic? You want me to negotiate with medical personnel? Doc stepped forward slightly, moving with the same calm confidence that had impressed Kor during their first meeting. Hello, Admiral Rex. I am Tom Miller. My friends call me Doc. Rex stared at the plainly dressed human. You presume to speak for these prisoners? I speak for myself. But if you want to discuss the welfare of my people, I am willing to listen. Your people have no bargaining position. You are prisoners. Doc nodded thoughtfully. That is true. We are at your mercy. However, I notice that your ships show recent battle damage. Your own Admiral Kor is wearing medical bandages under his uniform, and your crew looks tired, as if they have been fighting difficult battles recently. Rex's eyes narrowed. How could you possibly know about fleet operations? I observe things. It is part of being a medic. I also notice that you have medical officers among your staff, but they seem young and inexperienced. What is your point? Doc's expression remained friendly and calm. No point, really. Just observations. Though I do wonder if you might be interested in some information that could help your medical personnel treat wounded soldiers more effectively. Kor watched with fascination as Doc slowly turned the conversation from interrogation to discussion. The human medic did not argue or resist Rex's demands. Instead, he offered something valuable while asking for nothing in return. What kind of medical information? Rex demanded. Techniques for treating battlefield injuries when advanced medical equipment is not available. Ways to stabilize critically wounded soldiers during transport. Methods for preventing infection in hostile environments. Why would you share such information with enemies? Doc tilted his head slightly. Are we enemies? I thought we were just different species who had not met before. Soldiers get wounded in every army. Medical knowledge that saves lives seems more valuable than weapons that take them. For 20 minutes, Doc described human medical techniques while Rex listened with growing interest. The human medic explained how to perform emergency surgery with basic tools, how to treat shock and blood loss, and how to manage pain without advanced medications. Other coalition officers began asking questions. Doc answered each one patiently, often demonstrating techniques on volunteer subjects. Soon half the room was gathered around the human medic, fascinated by medical approaches they had never considered. Enough, Rex finally called out. This is supposed to be an interrogation, not a medical seminar. Doc stepped back politely. Of course, Admiral. I apologize if I got carried away. Medicine is my passion. Rex studied the human medic with new attention. Doc had somehow transformed a hostile interrogation into a collaborative learning session. Coalition officers who had entered the room, viewing humans as primitive enemies, were now treating Doc with obvious respect. You are an unusual prisoner, Rex admitted. I am just a medic who wants everyone to go home safely. And if we refuse to release your people, Doc's expression did not change. Then I suppose we will remain your prisoners. But I hope you will allow me to continue helping with medical care. Wounded soldiers need treatment regardless of which uniform they wear. Admiral Kor stepped forward. Fleet Commander, I recommend prisoner exchange negotiations. These humans have proven valuable allies during combat operations. Allies? Rex looked shocked. They are prisoners. They fought alongside coalition forces against pirate attacks. Their medics saved my life using primitive techniques when our advanced medical technology failed. They have shared medical knowledge freely and asked for nothing in return. Rex studied the humans again, this time seeing them differently. Commander Blake stood at attention, showing proper military discipline. But the other humans watched Doc with obvious trust and affection, creating a dual command structure that Rex had never encountered. Very well, Rex decided. We will arrange prisoner exchange with your government. But I want this medic to remain and train our medical personnel. I am afraid that will not be possible, Doc said politely. My place is with my people. I could order you to stay. Doc smiled. You could, but forced teaching is rarely effective. Medical techniques require trust between instructor and student. Rex found himself nodding agreement before he realized what he was doing. Somehow this human medic had made refusing his request seem unreasonable. The prisoner exchange was completed within 6 hours. As the humans prepared to board their new transport ship, Admiral Kor approached Doc privately. I have been thinking about our conversations regarding authority and leadership. Yes, in coalition society, we maintain order through rigid hierarchy. But watching your people, I see something we might be missing. Doc waited patiently for Kor to continue. Your humans follow you because they trust your judgment, not because they fear your punishment. That creates loyalty that goes deeper than mere obedience. Trust is earned through action, Doc agreed. But it also makes leadership harder. Every decision must consider the welfare of those who follow you. Perhaps that is what makes it stronger. As the human transport departed, Admiral Kor stood at the observation deck watching them leave. Admiral Rex joined him, both officers contemplating what they had learned about human society. That medic changed how our entire crew thinks about authority. Rex observed. They respect him more than they respect us, and he never gave them a single order. Because he consistently put their welfare above his own interests, Kor replied. In human society, the best leaders are often those who never sought power, but accepted responsibility because someone needed to. The coalition fleet watched the human ships disappear into hyperspace, carrying with them new questions about leadership, authority, and the nature of power itself. Admiral Kor made a note in his official report. Recommend further study of human command structures. Their flexible hierarchy system may offer advantages over traditional coalition methods. The galaxy had just become a more complex place.